Hey, how's it going? My name is Gabby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing a very exciting video where I let you know about every single book that I DNF'd in the year of 2022. Over the years, I have gotten a lot more comfortable with DNFing books. I feel like it's something that I used to put a lot of pressure on myself, like, no, I need to finish reading this book. But now, honestly, if I'm not enjoying a book and I don't have any real reason to finish it, because I feel like sometimes there are still legitimate reasons why I would need to finish a book. Like, for example, for my book club, like, I can't DNF books for my book club, or like, if I have certain video priorities that I'm trying to do, then sometimes I will follow through and finish a book even if I'm not feeling it. But these are the 15 books that I had a pretty reasonable amount of time invested in these, or I actually put in some real effort to try and get into these books, and they just didn't end up working out for me, and I DNF'd them for one reason or another. I'm sure there are plenty of other books that I started maybe like the first chapter or two, and I decided to just set it aside at the moment because it just wasn't for me. But these are 15 books that I actually tried. I got at least 50 pages into them, and these were the books that I just decided it's not for me, I'm not into it right now. But before we do jump into the list, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Ana Luisa for sponsoring today's video. Ana Luisa is my favorite jewelry brand. You've probably been seeing me wear their rings in like every single video that I make because I'm obsessed with Ana Luisa's rings. They not only have rings, but they have necklaces, they have earrings, they have all kinds of jewelry. I think that Ana Luisa would make either a great gift for yourself if you're looking to treat yourself this holiday season, but they'd also make a really great gift. Like, the gift of jewelry is such a beautiful gift to give. They offer speedy delivery all around the world, and their prices start at $39 with no luxury markups, unlike other brands, which is pretty wild when you consider how nice their jewelry is. Like, their jewelry is so well crafted, it's so beautiful, and I think that there really is something for everyone, whether you're looking for something that's a little bit more fancy and looks a little bit more high-end, or if you're just looking for something a little bit simplistic but still beautiful and elegant. I also love that this company cares about sustainability, and their packaging is so minimalistic and so nice. So the 3 jewelry pieces that I got to select this time around include this beautiful necklace that has this big star on it. I really love this one because it's somehow very simplistic but also so stunning at the same time. And then I also ended up going with another necklace. This one is really cool because it's almost like a 2-chain, kind of like 2-layer necklace. And then I also chose another one of their rings, and this one is really cool because it actually comes as a ring set. So there are 2 separate rings that you can separate, and it's just so beautiful. Oh my gosh, it looks like a little star and a little moon, and I'm just freaking obsessed with this, and I think it looks so good. And of course, right next to it, I have my mood ring. That's like one of my favorite rings from Ana Luisa. Like, I literally never take this off. Ana Luisa is having some of their best and biggest sales that they have during the entire year right now over on their website. So you can go ahead and use the link in my description, use my code gabbyreads20 to get 20% off your order. And thank you so much to Ana Luisa for sponsoring today's video. And now let's get into the books. First book that I wanted to talk about is probably my most recent DNF on this whole list, and I don't know if this book is going to be a permanent DNF or not, but it's Never Ever Getting Back Together by Sophie Gonzalez, and this is a book that I got 108 pages into this. I actually started reading this one though before it came out and before the audiobook was available. The reason why though I decided to set this one aside at the time was because it was starting to read like super YA to me, which I know is a ridiculous complaint because it's like, duh, this is a young adult book, like what are you expecting, but I think the premise of this book intrigues me so much because it's about these 2 girls who go onto this dating show, and this is a guy that they have both previously dated. It's like a dating show where he's supposed to like find love with a girl that he's already had love with, and it's supposed to be like he's gonna get back together with one of his ex-girlfriends, and then it's about how these 2 girls start falling for each other instead. And so like the vibes, like I'm here for the vibes. I definitely still want to finish this, but I guess my issue with it is that in the beginning at least, I feel like these girls are just so dramatic in like that young adult way that's just really obnoxious, even though they're both about like 18-ish years old. Like, they're not exactly young, but they're still young enough that it was just like they were being very dramatic, and it's kind of like that's kind of the intention, I think, with shows like this, like dating shows. Like, they're supposed to be dramatic, but I don't know, it was just kind of annoying me at the beginning. So I decided that I think I'm gonna wait for the audiobook so that I can listen to the audiobook while doing other things instead of having all of my focus on this book, because as of right now, these characters are just kind of driving me a little bit crazy, like just a tad. And so I'm gonna set it aside for now and come back to it at another time, maybe early next year. Maybe that'll be the time for me to read this. Also, this book totally matches my sweater. Anyways, had to point that out. Alright, so the next book that I ended up DNFing was Little Heaven by Nick Cutter, and this one was kind of a bummer that I had to DNF this book because this is a book that I was reading for that video that I was doing of reading your horror recommendations, and this is one of the books that got recommended to me, and this just did not work for me, and that's upsetting for a number of reasons, but mainly because Nick Cutter is the author of The Troop, which is one of my absolute all-time favorite horror books, and I thought Nick Cutter could do no wrong, but turns out he can. Sorry, that was really dramatic, but I just didn't really like Little Heaven. I think the main reason why this one didn't work for me is because I'm not the biggest fan of reading about religious horror in particular, and I don't know why the title didn't tip me off to the fact that this was going to be so religious. Like, I know it's called Little Heaven, I should have known better, but I didn't. I just kind of went into this book not knowing anything, and so I wasn't expecting it to be as religious as it is. There were some aspects of this book that did intrigue me, like there's this whole thing with this kind of like monster in this book that was pretty cool, but also this book was just such a drag. Oh my god, it was so freaking boring. It's so freaking hard to get through. I just couldn't do it. It just wasn't for me. So sadly, this was a DNF. I'm pretty sure I got like over 200 pages into this one too, so like that really sucks. And then I also ended up DNFing The Silent Companions right around that same time. This was another book that I read for that video of reading your horror book recommendations. That video just didn't go as well for me as I'd hoped, because I had 2 DNFs out of the 8 books that I read. So I mean, it was kind of a bummer. But The Silent Companions, this is one that I was interested in for a long time because I had heard really good things. It's this horror novel, but it's very historical, like very historical. And that's something that I don't think I realized when I was getting into it, is that a lot of it would take place in the years, like I think it's the 1600s that this book takes place in. And the writing style was just so hard for me to get into, especially because I wasn't able to get my hands on the audiobook. I had trouble accessing this book just in general. It just wasn't very widely available, and so it was hard to get access to this book in the first place. And then there's no audiobook for this book. At least I'm pretty sure there's no English audiobook. There's only like a German audiobook if I remember correctly. And so it was just a total struggle for me. I could not get into this writing style. It's really rare that I do read historical fiction and enjoy it. So historical fiction can just be very hit or miss for me in general. But this one, for some reason, oh my gosh, I just could not do it. I think I got about like, I want to say I got like 80 pages into this one before I just called it a day and I DNF'd it. And then I also tried to read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, and I think this was mostly because I had seen a lot of my friends reading this book and really enjoying it. I know Kayla had this as a Literally Dead book club pick, I think in August. And I tried to read this one, I listened to it on audio, and I got about maybe 20% of the way into the audiobook before I was like, yeah, I don't know what the fuck is happening. And I think at the end of the day, this is a book that is just not for me. I could not connect with this writing style. It felt very, like, you can definitely tell that it's horror, but it's also fantasy to a certain degree where I just couldn't get into it because the fantasy element felt too much. I am just not a fantasy reader, you know, we know this, I know this, you know this, we all know this. And so I don't think it's that big of a surprise for me that this didn't end up working out for me. I just wanted to give it a shot, you know, because you never know. And then next I have the book Funny You Should Ask. This one is kind of a bummer that I DNF'd this one, I'm not gonna lie, because I bought this one, I was so hyped to read it, I loved the cover. You know, I love the pink and the red and it's just so cute. I also heard, I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that this book was inspired by like a real life Chris Evans interview or something like that, and I was like, wait, what? Because the whole like premise of this book just really intrigues me because we're following this girl who's like, I can't remember if she's like a journalist or she's just kind of, she's a writer that's like looking for her big break, and she gets the opportunity to interview this actor that's like a really big actor. He's like making his breakthrough role in like a James Bond movie or something, and he's like, you know, he's gonna have his big moment, and then we kind of follow them when she's doing the interview, but then also like years later when they like reconnect again. And I just really thought that this was gonna be my thing, you know, because like I love romances that follow actors in like the film industry. I think that's so interesting, and it was really interesting at first too, and I think that's what sucks, is that I was so invested in the first like 50 pages or so, but then it just quickly kind of got stale and kind of got boring to me. I think I only got maybe like 150, maybe 200 pages into this one before I DNF'd it, because I was just like, I'm just not really feeling it with these two anymore. I fell asleep listening to this audiobook twice. Like, that never happens for me. So like, I don't know, it was just not for me, which is kind of a bummer because I really thought this one had the potential to be a new fave, but no. Another romance I was totally bummed about not liking very much is Hook, Line, and Sinker, which this one is the sequel to, I think it's called It Happened One Summer. And I really ended up enjoying It Happened One Summer. That one's the one with the girl that's like, it's very Schitt's Creek vibes, you know, she gives major Alexis vibes. And so naturally, I was really excited to read Hook, Line, and Sinker because it's from her sister's point of view and it's her relationship with the guy Fox that was like in the first book. I think his name was Fox, right? I just feel like this is another one of those cases where the first book is really great and there's some kind of magic about the first book that I just really connected with and clicked with, and then the second book in the series just doesn't have that same magic for me. And that's really how I felt about this one. I was listening to this on audio almost all day. I remember I was listening to this when I was taking a long drive, and I was listening to this audiobook almost all day. And then by the end of the day, I couldn't recall a single thing that I had listened to on audio because I was just getting distracted. I just didn't really care. It was like I was so uninvested, which sucks because I should have loved this. And so that's a total bummer. You know what else is a bummer? Freaking I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. This was one of my most anticipated books because Casey McQuiston wrote Red, White, and Royal Blue, which apparently, I don't know if now they're just like a one-hit wonder because I haven't enjoyed anything they've written since Red, White, and Royal Blue, but I loved Red, White, and Royal Blue so much that I'm willing to read anything that they come out with, apparently. This one, I was hesitant about it, you know, I was kind of nervous because this is a young adult romance, and we know, you know, young adult doesn't always work for me these days, and this was definitely the case where this just did not work for me. We're following these like really, you know, obnoxious high school age kids, and they're all obsessed with this girl, Shara Wheeler. She like kisses this person and then disappears. It felt very John Green to me. Like it felt very like Looking for Alaska. Like that's what I got from this book. It's like Casey read John Green and was like, I'm gonna write that but different. I don't know, it was so obnoxious. It just was not for me. I just expected something a little bit different, I guess. And then I also ended up DNFing Kill River, which this is also kind of a bummer. I think I read this one during Summerween because I wanted something to read for the slasher prompt, and slashers, that's another one of those things that's very like hit or miss for me. Like 99% of the time, I don't really enjoy the slashers that I try to read. And I explain it all the time as like, you know, it doesn't make sense because I love slasher movies and like there's something so exciting and intense about a slasher movie. I think it's like the music and the buildup and the, you know, everything. But for some reason, reading slashers in like book format is just so boring. And this one in particular just didn't really work for me because, well, for one, I was not expecting the characters to be as young as they are in this book. I'm pretty sure the characters are like 13ish, maybe 14 years old, and I don't know why I was not anticipating that they would be quite that young. And if they weren't that young, because my memory's a little fuzzy on it, to be honest, so if they're not that young, then they read a lot younger than I thought that they would. I don't know, this is another one where it just felt like, it just felt so mediocre to me. It felt like the author was just trying way too hard to make these characters seem, you know, cool and relatable. It just, a lot of it felt very forced, and I just was not invested at all. Like, I could not give a fuck who was dying in this book. Ugh. And then I also DNF'd The Ghost Tree. This is a book that I DNF'd for the second time this year, okay? This is a book that I've given multiple chances because I want to love this book so desperately. I actually read this book, okay, I read it like, I want to say last year. I read the first like 100 pages or so, and then I just stopped reading it. And then this year I was like, why did I stop reading it? Like, I couldn't remember why I had DNF'd it before, so I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna read it again. This time it's gonna go better for me. And this time I had the audiobook. I was like, I'm gonna push through it. And this book, I feel like this book is just really being mismarketed, or maybe I'm just going in with the wrong expectation, you know, because from what I understood about this book, I thought it was like a horror book, and the premise just really lets you believe, you know, it's like, oh my god, these girls go missing in this small town, and like their bodies are found just like ripped to shreds and like left on the front lawn, and you're just like, what the fuck? And it just makes it seem like it's gonna be kind of like horror, right? But then I swear part 2 of this book hits, and it turns into almost this like fantasy story that involves like curses and I don't even know. I was just so bored by part 2 of this book that it really ruined my whole enjoyment of it, because I was like, okay, this is not going in a direction where I thought it would go. I thought it would be more just like kind of fun, you know, like it just wasn't going in the direction that I wanted it to. And I feel like it sucks that I DNF'd this book, and it sucks that I don't like it, because I do feel like this book has such a cool premise, and it's like exactly the kind of horror that I enjoy reading. And so that's why it hurts so much, you know, and that's why it sucks, because I feel like the first 100 pages of this book were so good and I was so invested that like it really sucked the moment I started to become a lot less invested in the story and I realized it was going in a direction where I was just like, I don't care. And then I also ended up DNFing House of Hollow. This is another one that was, you know, I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about it because again, it's like a young adult kind of like horror novel that follows these sisters. It has this like magical element to it as well, which apparently has just been very hit or miss for me if books have this kind of element. But this is another one where, you know, I was reading this for Spring Flingoween earlier this year and I just could not get invested in the story for the life of me. Like I was trying so hard to get into it. I think the premise of this book is really cool, you know, because it's like these sisters, they go missing when they're younger and then when they come back they're like slightly different, like they have these different things happening to them. Like it just sounds like it would be really cool, but I think the magical element of this book just really lost me. You know, like if there's like slight fantasy, I'm just so particular about the kind of fantasy that I like to read, and this just wasn't it for me exactly. But it is kind of a bummer because I know so many of my friends love this one, and so that's the only reason why I'm like, maybe this won't be a forever DNF, maybe it's just a DNF for now and I'll come back to it maybe in a few years, I don't know. And then I also DNF'd The Lost Girls of Camp Evermore. This is actually one that I was reading for that video that I did that was like reading books like Stranger Things or something like that, because it had been put on the list on Book Riot. It was put on the list of like, if you enjoy Stranger Things then read these books. So I was like, okay. But this book was so incredibly boring and so nothing like Stranger Things that I have no idea why it got put on a list like that in the first place, because the story was just, you know, it was very like coming of age. We're just following these girls who go camping and then something happened when they were camping and then we're like flashing back to when they're adults and see their lives when they're adults, and then it flashes back to what happened when they were at the camp, and it just had no Stranger Things vibes like at all. Like I guess the coming of age elements to it maybe, but there was like nothing sci-fi, nothing horror about this book. Like it was just very odd to me that this would get compared to Stranger Things, and I was just so incredibly bored. I couldn't connect with the characters and I just didn't really like the overall atmosphere in this book. It was totally a downer and not really what I was expecting it to be, so I ended up DNFing this one too around like 100 pages in, I want to say. And then I also DNF'd The Night Shift. You know, when I saw this on my list, I was like, what the fuck is The Night Shift? Like for some reason I was thinking about the Stephen King book and I was like, I didn't DNF The Night Shift. And then I was like, oh, it's the Alex Finlay book. I remember that I actually did try to read this in March this year. I have literally like 0 to no memories about this book. Like I do not remember a goddamn thing. And I think that goes to show right there like why I would have DNF'd it, because it left no impression on me whatsoever. But this one's a thriller. I think it takes place in like the 90s, I want to say, and it involves like a serial killer. I just think there's something with this author that I just don't quite connect with, you know, because this author was the same author of Every Last Fear that came out last year, and I wasn't a fan of that one either. I DNF'd that one, and then this one as well. I think it was just the writing style in this one, and then I think if I'm remembering correctly, I believe there's like a detective point of view or something like that, and that just really bored me, and so I just didn't want to read it. And then I also DNF'd Dating Dr. Dill, and this one was sad because this romance had so much potential and was so cute at the beginning, because this is like a romance where she's gonna be dating this guy who's a doctor, and she is a Swiftie, okay? I remember that about this book. She's a really big Taylor Swift fan, and that's something that I loved about her character, and I was immediately like, yes girl, we're on the same page, you know, like she was just so cool. But then, oh my god, the romance just got so cheesy and so cringe. She literally names she names it Charlie. Like, why? What the fuck? It was just so it was uncomfortable. It was strange. I just didn't like it. I wasn't a fan of their romance. They just didn't feel like they had any chemistry, and I was just like, I don't know, like I don't want to read that, sorry, no. And then I also DNF'd this book called The Plotters. This is actually one that I probably would have never picked up on my own if I'm being honest, but I was reading this one for that video that I did earlier this year that was like reading Korean thriller and horror authors, and this one came up on a few different lists of like best-selling Korean thriller books, so I added it to the list for that reason. But looking back on it, I know that this probably would be something I wouldn't enjoy, because this one involves like, you know, spies and assassins and like government people like taking each other out, and like that is just not something that I'm ever interested in reading, so I don't know why I even tried. And then the last book on this list that I have that I DNF'd this year was The Party by Robin Harding, which this one is kind of a bummer, but also not the most unexpected thing, because Robin Harding is one of those thriller authors where I feel like I always want to read every single one of her books, but then they always end up being around a 3-star for me, but they're just like highly entertaining, so I want to read them anyways. And this one, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe The Party was her debut thriller. So this is one of her backlist that I haven't gotten around to yet. But this was one of those books where, you know, the premise was like interesting enough. It was like there was this party and this girl, like something happened to this girl at the party. I barely, like, oh my god, I can't even explain this book to you because I fucking don't remember. It was just, from what I remember, it's a hot mess. You know, like these people, all of these characters are a hot mess. None of them are supposed to be likable, but that's not the issue that I had with it. I think the issue was that it was just kind of boring because the party, if I'm remembering correctly, the party and like the incident with all of that happens like right at the beginning, and then after that it's just like a lot of like what happens after the party, and I just wasn't that interested in it. Like it just wasn't very engaging, and it honestly felt more like family drama than thriller to me. Like there was nothing thrilling happening in the story, at least in my opinion. And so I just ended up DNFing it because I just found it to be a little bit predictable and a little bit dramatic and just not really my thing. But Robin Harding is still an author that I will definitely be reading all of her new releases because, again, her books can just be so fun and so like mindless and just entertaining for me, you know? So I love that. I do need some of that in my life. Alright, so those are all of the books that I have DNF'd in the year 2022. You know, I'm sure there are more that I'm forgetting about just because, you know, as I said, DNFing has become something I do pretty regularly these days, but these are the ones that stuck with me the most, or that I made the most effort to try to read these books, and they just didn't end up working out. You know, it happens. But anyways, let me know what you think of any of these books on this list. If you've read them, let me know if you think they're worth finishing or if you think I made the right decision by DNFing it. And also let me know, which books have you DNF'd this year? Do you have any like hot takes? Do you have any tea on like which popular books you were like, absolutely not, DNF? Let me know all of the information down below. Also, don't forget to check out Ana Luisa. You can use my code gabbyreads20 to get 20% off your order and get some amazing jewelry. Get it for yourself, get it for a loved one. Seriously, Ana Luisa's rings, you cannot go wrong. They're just so beautiful. And thank you so much for watching today's video, and I will see you very soon with another one. Bye.